When my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and said, "We think it's best if you don't come to Thanksgiving this year," I felt my world crumble. After 40 years of hosting family holidays, I was suddenly unwelcome at my own son's table. What happened next would change our family dynamic forever and teach me the most important lesson of my retirement years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning started like any other Tuesday in November. I woke up at 6, old habits from my teaching days die hard, and shuffled to the kitchen of my modest 2-bedroom condo in Mapleton. The place still felt too big for just me, even 3 years after Harold passed. But the large kitchen had been my sanctuary for decades, where I'd prepared countless family meals and holiday feasts. I made my ritual cup of Earl Grey tea, added just a splash of milk like Harold used to tease me about. "Eleanor, you might as well have hot milk with a hint of tea," and settled at the small breakfast nook overlooking my little garden. The chrysanthemums were still hanging on, defying the first frost that had come through last week. Stubborn, like me. My phone chimed with a text message. It was Beth, my daughter-in-law. "Can you stop by around 11? Need to talk about Thanksgiving." "Plans." I smiled. Finally. I'd been waiting for weeks to discuss the holiday menu with her. This would be the 4th Thanksgiving since Harold's passing, but the first where I'd felt truly ready to jump back into my role as family matriarch and hostess. The previous years, Beth and my son Michael had insisted on hosting at their house. "To give you a break, Mom. But this year I wanted my family back around my table. I wanted the rhythm of basting a turkey in my own oven, the familiar chaos of too many cooks in my kitchen, the sound of my 3 grandchildren bickering over who got the wishbone." I spent the morning tidying up, humming as I dusted and straightened the photo frames on the mantel. There was the wedding photo of Michael and Beth, Beth looking radiant in her simple gown, her dark hair swept up with tiny white flowers. Next to it, a photo of my younger son Daniel with his partner James at the Grand Canyon. And crowding the rest of the shelf, pictures of my grandchildren, Michael's kids, Lily, now 16 and looking more like her mother every day, 12-year-old Thomas with Harold's wide grin, and little Emma, just 8, who had my stubborn chin. At precisely 10:55, I pulled into the driveway of Michael and Beth's sprawling colonial in the suburbs. Their house always struck me as too large, too pristine, more like a showroom than a home. But Beth took pride in keeping everything immaculate, from the perfect symmetry of the boxwoods flanking the front door to the unblemished white of her kitchen countertops. I knocked out of courtesy, then used my key to let myself in. "Hello?" "It's just me. In the kitchen, Eleanor," Beth called out. "Not Mom. Not today. That should have been my first clue." Beth was sitting at the kitchen island, her laptop open before her, a spreadsheet displayed on the screen. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore her usual uniform of expensive yoga wear despite never having set foot in a yoga studio as far as I knew. "Tea?" she offered, already reaching for a mug. "Please," I said, settling onto the stool across from her. "So, Thanksgiving plans? I've been thinking we could go back to tradition this year. I'm feeling up to hosting again, and you know how much I've missed having everyone at my place." Beth's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she set the steaming mug before me. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." Something in her tone made me pause with the mug halfway to my lips. "Oh? We've been thinking," she began, and I noticed the royal "we" immediately. This was a decision that had already been made. The holidays have been a bit chaotic the past few years. After losing Harold, and then with Daniel and James usually, splitting their time between us and James's family in Chicago. "Daniel already confirmed they're coming here this year," I interrupted. "James's parents are taking that cruise, remember?" Beth nodded stiffly. "Yes, I know. But that's part of what Michael and I have been discussing. We think it's time to start some new traditions. Something a bit more modern. I sipped my tea, waiting. It wasn't like Beth to dance around a subject. Whatever she was trying to say, it wasn't good news. The thing is, Eleanor, she continued, the kids are getting older now. Lily especially is at that age where family obligations can feel restrictive. And my sister Jennifer has invited us to join them at their cabin in the mountains this year. It would be a nice change of pace. I set my mug down carefully. I see. Well, that sounds lovely. When would you leave? Perhaps we could do an early Thanksgiving here before you go? Beth didn't meet my eyes, instead focusing on adjusting her laptop screen. Actually, we'd leave Wednesday afternoon, and Jennifer's cabin is quite small. It's really just meant for immediate family. The implication hung heavily in the air between us. I was no longer considered immediate family. Beth, I said slowly, are you telling me that you, Michael, and the kids are spending Thanksgiving without me? She finally looked up, her expression a practiced mix of sympathy and determination. We think it's best if you don't come to Thanksgiving this year. It's nothing personal, Eleanor. It's just families evolve, traditions change. Nothing personal. As if excluding a mother and grandmother from Thanksgiving dinner could ever be anything but deeply, painfully personal. Does Michael know you're having this conversation with me? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Beth's eyes flickered, briefly. Of course. We discussed it at length. But I knew my son. Michael avoided conflict like the plague, a trait he'd inherited from his father. If this conversation had been left to him, he would have waited until the day before Thanksgiving to mention it, stumbling through excuses and apologies. I'd like to speak with him, I said. He's at work, Beth replied smoothly. He didn't want to take time off for, well, he knew this might be a difficult conversation. Coward, I thought, immediately feeling guilty. My sweet conflict-avoidant son had sent his wife to do his dirty work. I see, I said again, though I didn't see at all. What I couldn't understand was how I'd gone from being the heart of our family, holidays, to an inconvenient guest who needed to be uninvited. And what about Daniel and James? Are they going to this cabin too? Beth had the grace to look uncomfortable. They've been invited, yes. But you just said the cabin was small. Too small for me, but not too small for Daniel and James? Eleanor, Beth sighed, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. You know what I mean. It's a family trip, with the kids. I'm family, I said softly. I'm their grandmother. Of course you are. Beth reached across the island as if to pat my hand, but I pulled it away. No one's disputing that. It's just different now. Different because Harold was gone? Different because at 65 I was apparently too old to adapt to modern traditions? Different because Beth had never quite warmed to me despite my best efforts over the 16 years she'd been married to my son? I took a deep breath. And what am I supposed to do for Thanksgiving? This question seemed to genuinely surprise her, as if she hadn't considered it at all. Oh, well, I'm sure there are plenty of options. Doesn't your church do a seniors' Thanksgiving? Lunch? Or maybe you could join that widows group you mentioned? The widows group. As if my entire identity had been reduced to the absence of my husband. I see, I said for the third time, knowing I sounded like a broken record but unable to find other words that wouldn't emerge as a scream or a sob. We just thought you'd appreciate knowing in advance, Beth added, as if she were doing me a favor. So you could make other plans. I stood up, leaving my tea half finished. Thank you for your consideration. Beth followed me to the door, her expression a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. You understand, don't you, Eleanor? It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. Just my family excluding me from a holiday I'd centered my life around for decades. Of course, I lied, fumbling with my car keys. Families evolve. Traditions change. As I drove home, a strange numbness settled over me. The rational part of my brain tried to process what had just happened. Was this normal? Did other mothers and grandmothers find themselves suddenly surplus to requirements? Was this just another indignity of aging that no one had warned me about? The condo was achingly quiet when I returned. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, straightening pillows that didn't need straightening, opening and closing the refrigerator without taking anything out. My eyes fell on the small desk in the corner of my living room where I kept my calendar and paid my bills. Next to my checkbook sat the airline confirmation I'd printed out last week, a round-trip ticket to Phoenix for December, where my college roommate Marge had retired. She'd been inviting me to visit for years, but there had always been reasons to postpone. Harold's health, grandchildren's events, the comfortable inertia of routine. I picked up the printout, studying the dates. I was scheduled to fly out December 3rd and return on the 10th. Thanksgiving was November 28th this year. A week before my planned trip, an idea began to form. Not fully shaped yet, more of an impulse than a plan. I sat down at my computer and navigated to the airline's website. How difficult would it be to change my ticket? To leave earlier, perhaps? To leave before Thanksgiving? Very easy, as it turned out. For a modest change fee, I could depart on November 25th instead. 3 days before Thanksgiving. My finger hovered over the Confirm Changes button. This was ridiculous. I was being impulsive, emotional. Running away because my feelings were hurt. But another voice in my head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Harold's, whispered, "Why not? Why shouldn't you do something for yourself for once?" I clicked the button. A confirmation appeared on screen, and a new itinerary began printing from my old desktop printer that Harold had insisted on buying because he didn't trust storing documents in the cloud. I picked up my phone and dialed Marge's number. "Eleanor!" Marge's voice boomed through the speaker. She'd lost some of her hearing but refused to acknowledge it, resulting in conversations that neighbors 3 houses down could probably follow. "How are you, darling? All set for your December visit?" "Actually," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, "I was wondering if I could come a bit earlier." "Earlier? How much earlier? Next week? Before Thanksgiving?" There was a pause. Then Marge let out one of her signature laughs, loud and unrestrained. "Well, hell yes. Come for Thanksgiving. I was just going to heat up one of those sad little turkey dinners for one. You remember how I cook, or don't cook, more accurately. Having you here would be a godsend. You can take over my kitchen, make us a proper feast. You don't mind?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. "Mind? Eleanor Barnes, don't be ridiculous. I've been trying to get you out here forever. What finally convinced you to come early? The kid's busy or something?" The question was innocent enough, but it pierced right through me. "Something like that," I managed. "I'll explain when I see you." "Well, I'll have the guest room ready and a bottle of wine waiting. We'll have ourselves a proper girls' holiday." After hanging up, I sat in silence for several long minutes. The hurt was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs. But alongside it was something else. A flutter of anticipation, a spark of something that felt almost like freedom. I hadn't taken a trip on my own, a proper adventure, since before I was married. For 43 years, every decision had been made in consideration of others. First Harold, then our sons, then their families. Even my retirement activities revolved around the grandchildren's schedules, making myself available for school pickups and weekend stays. Perhaps it was time, finally, to consider what I wanted. I reached for a notepad and began making a list. I'd need to pack differently for a longer trip. I'd need to arrange for Mrs. Abernathy next door to collect my mail. I'd need to call Daniel and tell him. Tell him what exactly? That his brother and sister-in-law had uninvited me from Thanksgiving? That would only put him in an impossible position between his brother and me. No, I'd tell him something else. Not a lie, precisely, but not the whole truth either. I picked up the phone again and dialed Daniel's number. "Mom!" His warm voice filled me with immediate comfort. Of my two sons, Daniel had always been the more emotionally intuitive, the one who called just to chat, who remembered small details about my life. "I was just thinking about you. We finalized our flights for Thanksgiving yesterday." I swallowed hard. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I've had a change of plans." "Oh?" The concern was immediate in his voice. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I assured him. "More than fine, actually. I've decided to visit Marge in Arizona. I'm flying out on the 25th. "The 25th? But that's right before Thanksgiving." "Yes," I said, injecting enthusiasm into my voice. "I'm going to spend Thanksgiving with her. She's all alone out there, I know. And the warm weather will be a nice change." A pause. "Mom, is everything all right between you and Michael?" Trust Daniel to sense the undercurrents. "Of course," I said, perhaps too quickly. "Why do you ask?" "It's just not like you to miss a family holiday, especially Thanksgiving. You love Thanksgiving." I closed my eyes. "I do, but I'm trying something new this year. Aren't you always telling me I should shake things up more often?" He chuckled. "I am, and I'm proud of you for doing it. I just want to make sure you're not feeling pushed out or anything." The lump in my throat returned with a vengeance. "Not at all," I lied. "This is completely my choice." "Well, good for you then. We'll miss you, of course. But you deserve to enjoy yourself." After promising to call him the next week before my departure, I hung up and let out a long, shaky breath. One son down, one to go. Michael would be the harder call, not because he'd be more upset, but because he'd be less likely to question my sudden change of plans. He'd accept my story at face value, relieved to be spared the awkwardness of explaining why I wasn't invited to his Thanksgiving. Sure. Enough. When I called Michael that evening, his reaction was exactly as I'd predicted. "Arizona sounds great, Mom," he said, his voice artificially bright. "You'll miss the sleet we're supposed to get that week." "That's what I thought," I replied. "A nice break from winter." "Beth mentioned she spoke with you today about our plans," he added, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "She did," I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. "Sounds like you'll have a wonderful time in the mountains." "We will," he said, sounding relieved that I wasn't making things difficult. "And you'll have a great time with Marge. It's all worked out perfectly." Perfectly. As if this had been the plan all along, rather than me scrambling to salvage my dignity after being cast aside. "Listen, Mom," Michael continued. "I meant to talk to you myself about Thanksgiving, but work has been crazy and—" "It's fine, Michael," I interrupted, not wanting to hear his excuses. "Beth explained everything. I understand." "You do?" The relief in his voice was palpable and, frankly, a little hurtful. "Of course. Families evolve. Traditions change." "Exactly," he said, latching onto the lifeline I'd thrown him. "That's exactly it. I'm glad you understand." We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing of consequence. His work, the children's activities, the weather, before saying goodbye. I set the phone down feeling hollowed out, as if something essential had been scooped from my chest. But beneath that hollow feeling, something else was growing. Determination. If my family no longer needed me for the holidays, perhaps it was time to discover who Eleanor Barnes could be without them. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of purpose. Instead of my usual routine, I sat down with a fresh cup of tea and made a new list. Not a packing list this time, but something more significant. A list of things I'd always wanted to do but had put off. I'd been a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother. For so long that I'd forgotten the young woman who once had dreams that extended beyond the boundaries of home and family. That woman had wanted to travel, to learn new skills, to challenge herself. Where had she gone? Lost in the daily routines of life, in the constant adjustments made for others' comfort and convenience. But maybe it wasn't too late to find her. On at the top of my list, I wrote, 1. Visit the Grand Canyon with Marge. Daniel and James had gone 2 years ago and returned with breathtaking photos. Why shouldn't I see it too? The list grew quickly. Take a cooking class focusing on a cuisine I know nothing about. Learn to swim properly, not just the dog paddle I've relied on for 6 decades. Read all of Jane Austen's novels in 1 month. Try meditation. Get a completely different hairstyle. The last one made me pause. I'd worn my hair the same way, a practical chin-length bob, since Michael was born. Harold had liked it that way, said it framed my face nicely. But Harold was gone, and maybe it was time for a change. On impulse, I picked up the phone and called Darlene's salon downtown. "Do you have any openings today?" I asked when Darlene herself answered. "For you, Eleanor?" "Always. What did you have in mind? The usual trim?" "No," I said, surprising myself with my decisiveness. "Something completely different. I was thinking maybe something shorter, and perhaps some color." There was a brief silence before Darlene's delighted laugh came through the line. "Well, hallelujah. I've been wanting to update your look for years. Come in at 2 and we'll make some magic happen." 3 hours later, I stood in front of Darlene's mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back at me. My practical bob was gone, replaced by a stylish, modern pixie cut that accentuated my cheekbones and eyes. And the subtle caramel highlights Darlene had suggested warmed my silver-gray hair, giving it dimension and life. "What do you think?" Darlene asked, hovering anxiously behind me. "Too much?" I turned my head from side to side, taking in the transformation. "Not too much," I said slowly. "Just different." You look amazing," Darlene finished for me. "You look like yourself, just more so." More so. Yes, that was it exactly. I looked more like myself, not just the self I'd been, but the self I could be, the self I was becoming. As I paid for my haircut, adding a generous tip that made Darlene beam, I felt a lightness that had been absent for too long. This small act of rebellion against my own routine had ignited something in me. If a haircut could make me feel this different, what might other changes bring? The week before my departure passed in a flurry of preparations and small private rebellions. I donated 3 bags of clothes to Goodwill, sensible slacks and cardigans that had been my uniform for years but suddenly seemed to belong to someone else. I bought 2 new outfits that would have made the old Eleanor blush, a pair of slim-fitting jeans that the salesgirl assured me showed off my assets, and a vibrant turquoise blouse with a neckline lower than anything I'd worn in decades. I also bought hiking shoes, a wide-brimmed sun hat, and a guidebook to the Grand Canyon. If I was going to see one of the world's wonders, I was going to be prepared. The night before my flight, as I was finishing my packing, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily, my oldest grandchild. "Grandma, just heard her not coming for Thanksgiving?" Why? My heart clenched. I'd spoken to all 3 grandchildren briefly during my call with Michael, but had glossed over my change of plans, focusing instead on their activities and interests. Clearly, Michael or Beth had filled them in afterward. I typed carefully, "Going to visit my old friend Marge in Arizona. We're going to have an adventure." Lily's response was immediate. "But we always have Thanksgiving together." "It won't be the same without you." A lump formed in my throat. At least someone would miss me. "I'll miss you too, sweetheart. But sometimes it's good to try new things. I'll call on Thanksgiving, and you can tell me all about your mountain cabin." Ah. Long pause then. Mom says you're going to the Grand Canyon. I smiled. Of course Beth would have been listening when I mentioned my plans to Michael, probably relieved that I wasn't just sitting at home alone, making her feel guilty. That's the plan. I've always wanted to see it. Cool. Take lots of pics. I will. Love you, Lily. Love you too, Grandma. Bring me something cool. I set the phone down, a bittersweet feeling washing over me. It was hard to imagine Thanksgiving without my grandchildren. Without Thomas sneaking extra marshmallows from the sweet potato casserole when he thought no one was looking. Without Emma insisting on helping me make the gravy. Without Lily rolling her eyes at her parents' rules while secretly loving our family traditions. But perhaps this separation was necessary, not just for me to rediscover myself, but for them to appreciate what they might be losing as families evolved and traditions changed. The morning of my departure arrived with unexpected brightness, as if nature itself approved of my adventure. I took one last look around my tidy condo, checked that all the appliances were off, and wheeled my suitcase to the door. On impulse, I stopped at the hallway mirror for a final inspection. The woman who looked back at me seemed different from the Eleanor of just a week ago. Her hair was stylish and modern, her outfit comfortable but flattering, her posture straighter. But the biggest change was in her eyes. There was a spark there that had been missing for too long. Well, Eleanor, I said to my reflection, let's see what you're made of. As I locked the door behind me, I felt a curious mix of emotions: grief for what I was leaving behind, anxiety about stepping into the unknown, but above all, a surging excitement for whatever lay ahead. My daughter-in-law might have uninvited me from Thanksgiving, but in doing so, she'd given me an unexpected gift: the chance to rediscover the woman I used to be, and to meet the woman I might still become. And that was a gift I intended to make the most of. The Phoenix air hit me like a warm embrace as I stepped off the plane. November in Arizona felt like September back home. Bright sunshine, temperatures in the 70s, and a dryness that immediately made my skin feel tight after the humidity I was accustomed to. Eleanor Barnes, as I live and breathe. I turned to see Marge barreling toward me, her arms outstretched. Marge Sullivan had never been a subtle woman, and retirement had only amplified her expansive personality. Her silver hair was cropped even shorter than my new pixie cut, and she wore bright turquoise leggings with a flowing white tunic. Large dangling earrings caught the light as she moved, and at least 4 beaded necklaces clacked against each other around her neck. "Look at you," she exclaimed, holding me at arm's length after our embrace. "What happened to my sensible Eleanor? You've gone and gotten yourself a hip haircut." I touched my hair self-consciously. "Too much?" "Are you kidding? It's fabulous. You look 20 years younger." She linked her arm through mine, leading me toward the baggage claim. "Now tell me everything, and I mean everything. Your message was far too cryptic for my liking." By the time we'd collected my suitcase and were driving toward Marge's home in her cherry-red convertible, "My retirement gift to myself," she'd explained with a wink, I had recounted the entire painful conversation with Beth. "That little witch," Marge muttered, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. "And your son went along with it?" "Michael has always been a peacekeeper," I said, trying to be fair despite my hurt. "He avoids conflict at all costs." "Well, sometimes a little conflict is necessary," Marge replied, turning onto a wide street lined with palm trees and low-slung adobe houses. "Otherwise, you end up letting people walk all over you." I sighed, watching the unfamiliar landscape roll by. I suppose I should have stood up for myself more, insisted on being included. Marge shot me a sideways glance. "Maybe. Or maybe this is exactly what you needed." "Being excluded from my family's Thanksgiving?" "No," she said, pulling into the driveway of a beautiful adobe house with a red-tiled roof. "Having a reason to step outside your comfort zone." She put the car in park and turned to face me fully. "Eleanor, How long has it been since you did something just for yourself? Something that wasn't about being a wife or a mother or a grandmother? I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was, I couldn't remember. That's what I thought, Marge said gently. So maybe, just maybe, this hurt is also an opportunity. A nudge to rediscover who Eleanor Barnes is when she's not taking care of everyone else. I blinked rapidly, fighting unexpected tears. I'm not sure I remember who that is. Marge reached over and squeezed my hand. Well then, my dear friend, we have 6 days before Thanksgiving to find out. Marge's home was everything mine wasn't: open, airy, and decorated with a fearless eye for color. The walls were a warm terracotta, adorned with vibrant abstract paintings and woven textiles that Marge had collected on her travels. The furniture was comfortable but stylish, and large windows looked out onto a patio and garden where cacti and desert flowers created a landscape utterly foreign to my Midwestern eyes. The guest room is all ready for you, Marge said, leading me down a hallway. I put fresh towels in the bathroom, and there's a pitcher of water by the bed. The tap water here is safe, but tastes like minerals had a party in it. The guest room was painted a soothing sage green with a queen-sized bed covered in a handmade quilt. A small writing desk sat beneath the window, which offered a view of the mountains in the distance. It's beautiful, I said, setting my suitcase down. All of it. Your home is just like you, colorful and full of life, Marge laughed. And your home is just like you, organized, thoughtful, and reliable. Neither is better than the other. They're just different. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the journey and the emotions of the past week. I don't even know why I'm here, Marge. I mean, I know what happened, but I don't know what I'm hoping to get out of this trip. You don't need to know yet, Marge said, sitting beside me. That's the beauty of an adventure. You discover the purpose as you go along. She patted my knee. Now, why don't you rest for a bit? I'll open a bottle of wine and we can sit on the patio later and catch up properly. As Marge left, closing the door softly behind her, I unpacked my suitcase with the methodical precision that had always been my hallmark. Clothes hung or folded. In drawers, toiletries arranged neatly in the bathroom, guidebooks stacked on the nightstand. The familiar ritual calmed me, creating order in a week that had felt increasingly chaotic. Once everything was in its place, I lay down on the bed, intending to close my eyes for just a few minutes. Instead, I fell into a deep sleep, my body finally surrendering to the stress and travel fatigue. When I woke, the quality of light in the room had changed. The bright afternoon sun had softened to the golden glow of early evening. I checked my watch, 5:30. I'd slept for almost 3 hours. Feeling slightly disoriented but refreshed, I splashed cold water on my face, ran a comb through my new short hair, and went in search of Marge. I found her on the patio, just as she'd promised, a bottle of red wine open on the table beside her and 2 glasses already poured. She was talking animatedly on her phone but waved me to the comfortable-looking chair across from her. Yes, absolutely, that would be perfect, she was saying. 2 spots for the Wednesday tour. Yes, Eleanor Barnes and Marge Sullivan. Great, we'll see you at 7 a.m. sharp. She hung up and beamed at me. How was your nap, Sleeping Beauty? I didn't mean to sleep so long, I said, settling into the chair and accepting the glass of wine she handed me. What was that about a tour? Grand Canyon, day after tomorrow, Marge said, lifting her glass in a toast. 2 adventures. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a flutter of excitement. You didn't have to arrange that so quickly. I would have been happy just spending time here with you. Nonsense. You said you wanted to see the Grand Canyon, and that's what we're going to do. It's about a 4-hour drive each way, so a guided tour makes the most sense. They handle all the transportation, and we get to relax and enjoy the scenery. That sounds wonderful, I admitted. I've always wanted to see it. I know, Marge said, her tone softening. Harold mentioned it once, years ago. He said it was On your bucket list. But you always put it off because there were more practical ways to spend vacation time. The mention of Harold's name made my heart constrict, but not as painfully as it once might have. He said that? Marge nodded. At our 25th college reunion, he told me, Eleanor always puts everyone else first. She'd rather take the boys to theme parks or visit relatives than go see the places she really dreams about. I stared into my wine glass, watching the light play through the deep red liquid. He knew me well. He loved you for it, Marge said gently. But I think he'd be happy to see you finally doing something for yourself. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping our wine and watching the setting sun paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. So, Marge said finally, what else is on this adventure list of yours? Besides the Grand Canyon, I told her about the list I'd started. Swimming lessons, cooking classes, reading Jane Austen, meditation. All excellent choices, she approved. Though I would add, learn to line dance to that list. They offer lessons at the community center here every Thursday night, and it's an absolute hoot. I laughed, trying to imagine myself line dancing. I've always had 2 left feet, which makes it all the more entertaining, Marge countered. The point isn't to be good at everything, Eleanor. The point is to try. As the evening deepened around us, Marge and I reminisced about our college days, catching up on decades of life that our annual Christmas cards and occasional phone calls had only skimmed the surface of. She told me about her brief, disastrous, second marriage. 3 years of watching a grown man refuse to put his socks in the hamper was quite enough. Her unexpected career pivot from marketing to art therapy in her 50s, and her decision to retire to Arizona 5 years ago. Best thing I ever did, she declared, pouring us each another glass of wine. I was tired of shoveling snow and paying heating bills. Here, I've got sunshine year-round, a community of interesting people who aren't just defined by their jobs or their children, and the freedom to reinvent myself however I want. Is that what you did? Reinvent yourself? Marge considered this, tapping a brightly painted fingernail against her glass. Not exactly. It was more like uncovering the self. That was always there beneath the roles I played. Wife, ex-wife, career woman, caregiver to my parents at the end. Those were all parts of me, but not the whole me. She leaned forward, her eyes intense in the soft patio lights that had automatically come on as darkness fell. There's always been a Marge-shaped core inside me that remains constant, no matter what life throws my way. I just had to learn to listen to her again. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. There was an Eleanor-shaped core inside me too, a woman who had dreams and desires independent of her roles as wife, mother, and grandmother. I'd just stopped listening to her voice a long time ago. How do you start listening again? I asked. Marge smiled. You're already doing it. You changed your hair, you got on a plane, you're sitting in my backyard drinking wine when you should be home preparing for Thanksgiving. She made air quotes around the word should. Every time you ignore the should and follow the want, you're listening to that core self. The next day dawned bright and clear, with a quality of light that seemed almost crystalline compared to the softer sunlight back home. Marge had promised to show me around her neighborhood and take me to her favorite local spots. Wear comfortable shoes, she instructed over a breakfast of fresh fruit and yogurt that we ate on the patio. We're going to do some serious walking. The serious walking began with a tour of Marge's desert garden, where she proudly pointed out the names of cacti and succulents I'd never seen before. Saguaro, prickly pear, ocotillo, barrel cactus. Then we walked through her neighborhood, greeting neighbors who were out walking dogs or tending to their own desert landscapes. Everyone seemed to know Marge, stopping to chat and be introduced to her oldest and dearest friend from back east. I was struck by how integrated she was in this community that she'd only joined 5 years ago. Back home, I still felt like a newcomer in the condo complex I'd moved to 3 years after Harold's death, despite having lived in the same town for over 4 decades. "How did you make so many friends so quickly?" I asked as we walked away from a particularly animated conversation with a retired professor and his husband who lived 3 doors down from Marge. I said yes, she replied simply. Yes? Yes to invitations. Yes to trying new things. Yes to putting myself out there even when it felt awkward or uncomfortable. She linked her arm through mine as we walked. When you're young, friendships happen organically, through school, work, raising children. But as you get older, you have to be more intentional about it. You have to make the effort. I thought about my own social circle back home, which had contracted significantly after Harold's death. Many of our friends had been couples we'd known through Harold's work or our church. While they'd been supportive immediately after his passing, the invitations had gradually dwindled as they continued their coupled lives, and I did not. "I've become rather isolated," I admitted. "I see the grandchildren, of course, and I have my church group. But real friends? People I could call in the middle of the night if I needed something? There aren't many." "Then that's something else we're going to work on while you're here," Marge declared. "Friendship skills, starting with saying yes to life." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of activity. We browsed through small art galleries in a renovated historic district, where Marge knew every shop owner by name. We had lunch at a tiny restaurant where the chef came out to greet Marge personally and insisted we try his special green chili stew. We visited a community garden where Marge volunteered twice a week, helping to grow fresh produce for a local food bank. By mid-afternoon, I was pleasantly tired but exhilarated by all the new experiences. As we sat resting on a bench in a small park, watching children play on colorful equipment, I realized I hadn't thought about Michael, Beth, or the Thanksgiving slight for hours. "Penny for your thoughts," Marge said, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking how different today has been from my usual routine," I replied. "At home, I would have done laundry this morning, maybe gone to the grocery store. If it's Tuesday, I might have had my bridge group in the afternoon. Everything's so predictable." "Nothing wrong with predictable," Marge said mildly. "Routines give us structure, security." "But too much routine can become a trap," I countered, surprising myself with the insight. "You stop experiencing new things, meeting new people, you stop growing." Marge smiled. "Exactly. The trick is finding the balance, enough routine to feel secure, enough novelty to keep life interesting." That evening, we attended a community potluck dinner in Marge's neighborhood park. I was nervous at first, surrounded by strangers, but Marge's friends welcomed me warmly. I found myself drawn into conversations about books, politics, travel, and the best places to find authentic Mexican food in the area. By the time we walked back to Marge's house under a canopy of stars more brilliant than any I'd seen before, I felt a sense of belonging that had been missing from my life for longer than I cared to admit. "I like your friends," I told Marge as we prepared for bed. "They're interesting people." "They are," she agreed. "And diverse in all the ways that matter: ages, backgrounds, perspectives. That's what keeps conversations lively." I thought about my own social circle back home, mostly women my own age, mostly from similar backgrounds, mostly with similar viewpoints, safe, comfortable, and utterly predictable. "I need to expand my horizons when I get back," I said, more to myself than to Marge. "That's the spirit," she replied, giving me a quick hug before heading to her own room. "Tomorrow, the Grand Canyon awaits. Set your alarm for 5:30. The tour bus leaves at 7 sharp." The pre-dawn darkness was just beginning to lighten to a deep blue when Marge and I, travel mugs of coffee in hand, boarded the small tour bus that would take us to the Grand Canyon. There were only 10 other passengers, a young couple from Sunseei, Japan, who spoke limited English but smiled constantly, a boisterous family of 4 from Texas, an elderly couple who introduced themselves as retired teachers from Oregon, and 2 middle-aged sisters celebrating a birthday. Our tour guide, a wiry man named Jim with skin weathered by years in the sun, welcomed us aboard with an enthusiasm remarkable for such an early hour. "Folks, you are in for a treat today," he announced as the bus pulled away from the curb. "The weather is perfect. Clear skies, moderate temperatures, and the lighting this time of year makes for spectacular views. We'll make one stop for breakfast about halfway there, then arrive at the South Rim by mid-morning. We'll have about 4 hours to explore before heading back." As the bus traveled north, the landscape outside the windows gradually transformed. The flat desert surrounding Phoenix gave way to scrubby hills, which eventually became the forested highlands of the Colorado Plateau. Jim provided a running commentary on the geology, flora, and fauna of the regions we passed through, his knowledge impressive and his passion for the natural world infectious. During our breakfast stop at a rustic diner in Flagstaff, I found myself sitting across from the retired teachers from Oregon, Henry and Louise. "First time to the canyon?" Louise asked, spreading jam on her toast. "Yes," I admitted. "It's been on my list for years, but somehow I never made it a priority." "We understand completely," Henry said. "We put off seeing it until our retirement, too. Now we come back every year. There's something about that place that gets under your skin." "In a good way," Louise added quickly. "It puts things in perspective, makes your problems seem smaller." I thought about my reason for being on this trip, my hurt and disappointment over being excluded from my family's Thanksgiving. Would seeing one of the world's natural wonders put that into perspective? Make it seem smaller? Back on the bus, as we drew closer to our destination, Jim began preparing us for what we were about to experience. "Nothing I say can adequately describe what you're going to see," he told us. "The Grand Canyon is one of those rare places that exceeds every expectation. It's bigger, deeper, more colorful, and more overwhelming than you can imagine. So here's my advice. When you first approach the rim, don't look until you're right at the edge. Then take it all in at once. Trust me on this." When we finally arrived at the Grand Canyon National Park, my heart was beating faster with anticipation. Jim led us along a path, instructing us to keep our eyes on the ground or straight ahead until he told us otherwise. "Okay, folks," he said, as we apparently reached the rim. 3 more steps, and then look up." I took those 3 steps with my gaze fixed on the rocky path beneath my feet. Then, at Jim's command, I looked up and out. The breath left my body in a rush. Before me stretched an immensity that my mind could barely comprehend. A vast chasm of layered rock in hues of red, orange, gold, and purple, carved by the distant Colorado River into a landscape that seemed both ancient and alive. The far rim of the canyon appeared to be miles away, and the depth was dizzying. Sunlight played across the rugged terrain, creating shadows and highlights that shifted even as I watched. "Oh my," I whispered, reaching out instinctively to grasp Marge's hand. Words failed me. How could I possibly describe the feeling of standing at the edge of this magnificent abyss? This testament to the power of time and nature. This reminder of how small and temporary human concerns truly are. "I know," Marge murmured beside me, squeezing my hand. "I feel it too." We stood in silence for several long minutes, simply absorbing the grandeur before us. Around us, our fellow travelers were equally speechless, even the boisterous Texan family reduced to whispers and quiet exclamations of awe. Eventually, Jim gathered us for a guided walk along the rim trail, pointing out significant geological features and explaining how the canyon had formed over millions of years. I listened with half an ear, too overwhelmed by the visual experience to fully absorb the scientific details. All I could think was, this has been here all along, while I've been worrying about holiday meals and family dynamics and maintaining Routines. During our free time after the guided portion of the tour, Marge and I found a relatively secluded spot on the rim and sat on a bench, simply gazing out at the incredible view. "Feeling small yet?" Marge asked, a knowing smile on her face. "Infinitesimal," I replied, in the best possible way. And it was true. The hurt that had driven me to this journey, Beth's cold exclusion, Michael's passive acceptance of it, seemed trivial in comparison to the timeless beauty before me. Not that my feelings weren't valid, but they were temporary, changeable, part of the ebb and flow of human relationships. This canyon had endured for millions of years and would continue to exist long after all our family dramas had been forgotten. "I've been so focused on what I've lost," I said slowly, working through my thoughts as I spoke. "Harold, my role as the family holiday host, my sense of being essential to my children and grandchildren. But maybe I've been looking at it all wrong. Maybe these losses are actually space. Space to discover new parts of myself, new experiences, new connections." Marge nodded. "Like the Colorado River carving away rock to reveal all those beautiful layers underneath?" I laughed at the metaphor. "Exactly like that. Though I hope the process is a little less painful than being eroded for millions of years." "No guarantees there," Marge said with a wink. "Personal growth can be pretty erosive to the ego." We sat in companionable silence for a while longer, until the changing angle of the sun reminded us that our time at the canyon was limited. "One more thing before we have to head back to the bus," Marge said, standing up and rummaging in her backpack. She pulled out her phone. "We need photographic evidence of Eleanor Barnes at the Grand Canyon." I groaned. "Must we? You know I hate having my picture taken." "Precisely why we must. The new Eleanor embraces new experiences, remember? Including being photographed at one of the world's natural wonders." Reluctantly, I stood and allowed Marge to position me with the canyon as a backdrop. Then I insisted she hand her phone to a passing tourist so we could get a picture together. Looking at the results, I was surprised to see how relaxed and happy I appeared. My new haircut framed my face becomingly, and there was a sparkle in my eyes that had been missing in photos taken since Harold's death. I looked alive, present, engaged with the moment rather than merely enduring it. "Send these to me," I told Marge. "I want to show the grandchildren." And perhaps Michael and Beth as well, I thought but didn't say. Let them see that Grandma wasn't sitting at home alone, feeling sorry for herself. Let them see that she was out in the world, having adventures, growing and changing at 65. The bus ride back to Phoenix was quieter than the morning journey. Most passengers lulled into contemplative silence by the day's experience. I gazed out the window, watching the landscape transition back from highland forest to desert scrub, my mind replaying the magnificent vistas we'd seen. Beside me, Marge dozed, her head occasionally nodding forward before she jerked awake again. I smiled fondly at my old friend. How different my life might have been if I'd had her courage, her willingness to reinvent herself, her openness to new experiences. But it wasn't too late, was it? The Grand Canyon had been forming for millions of years. Surely at 65, I still had time for some significant personal geology. As twilight descended and the desert took on the purplish hue of early evening, I felt my phone vibrate in my purse. I pulled it out to find a text message from Daniel. "Just checking in, Mom. How's Arizona?" I smiled and typed back. "Saw the Grand Canyon today. No words to describe it. Truly life-changing." A moment later, "Wow, good for you. Send pics." I hesitated, then forwarded the photos Marge had taken. After a minute, Daniel responded, "You look amazing." "New haircut? And is that actually a smile on your face?" I laughed softly. Yes to both. And yes, I'm having a wonderful time. So glad to hear it. We miss you, but I'm happy you're doing this for yourself. The warmth of his message spread through me, easing some of the lingering hurt. At least one of my sons understood and supported my journey. Looking forward to hearing all about it when you get back, Daniel added. Love you, Mom. Love you too, I replied, then hesitated before adding, say Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, including Michael and his family if you speak to them. It was an olive branch of sorts, though I wasn't sure if Daniel would recognize it as such. I wasn't ready to reach out directly to Michael or Beth yet, but I didn't want to put Daniel in the middle of a family rift either. His response came quickly. Will do. Everyone sends love. Everyone. I wondered if that included Beth. Somehow I doubted it, but it didn't matter as much as it had a few days ago. The Grand Canyon had indeed provided perspective, not by making my hurt insignificant, but by reminding me that there was so much more to life, so much more to me than family. Holiday dynamics. As our bus finally pulled back into Phoenix after dark, I felt a curious sense of anticipation for the days ahead. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving Eve, and the day after would be the holiday itself. Back home, I would have been deep in preparations by now, shopping, cooking, cleaning, coordinating. Here, I had no responsibilities beyond enjoying myself and being present with my friend. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was exactly what I needed. Penny for your thoughts? Marge asked as we drove from the tour drop-off point back to her house in her little red convertible, the top down despite the evening chill because Marge insisted the desert sky was too beautiful to hide from. I was just thinking about tomorrow, I said, and how strange it feels to not be preparing for Thanksgiving. Oh, we're preparing, Marge corrected with a mischievous smile. Just not in the way you're used to. I've signed us up for a Thanksgiving Eve community dance at the senior center. You've done what? I stared at her in horror. Marge, you know I can't dance. Which is why it's perfect, she said, unfazed by my reaction. Remember that list of yours? Trying new things? Stepping outside your comfort zone? I groaned. I was thinking more along the lines of a cooking class or book club. Baby steps, Marge agreed, but sometimes you need a little push. And trust me, no one at these dances expects perfection. It's all about having fun and moving your body to the music. As we pulled into her driveway, I resigned myself to the inevitable. If I could stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and face the vertigo-inducing drop, surely I could survive a senior center dance. Fine, I said. But I reserve the right to sit out any line dancing. Marge's laughter echoed in the desert night. No promises, Eleanor. No promises at all. I stared at my reflection in the full-length mirror on the back of Marge's guest room door. The woman looking back at me was both familiar and strange. My face, my newly styled hair, but dressed in an outfit I would never have chosen for myself back home. Marge had insisted I borrow clothes for the community dance, claiming that nothing in my suitcase was festive enough. You can't go to a pre-Thanksgiving dance looking like you're headed to a library board meeting, she'd declared, rifling through my neatly packed clothes with barely concealed dismay. So here I was, wearing a flowing tunic in a shade of coral that I would have previously considered far too bright for a woman my age, paired with black leggings that were considerably more form-fitting than my usual slacks. A long silver necklace and matching earrings completed the ensemble. Are you decent? Can I come in? Marge called, knocking lightly on the door. I'm dressed, I replied, though decent might be a matter of opinion. Marge swept in, resplendent, in a turquoise dress with silver embroidery around the neckline. She stopped short when she saw me, her face breaking into a delighted smile. Eleanor Barnes, she said slowly, you look absolutely fabulous. I tugged self-consciously at the tunic. I feel ridiculous. This color is perfect with your complexion, Marge interrupted. "It brings out the pink in your cheeks and makes your eyes sparkle." She stepped behind me, placing her hands on my shoulders and studying our joint reflection. "You've been hiding behind neutral colors for too long, my friend. Remember college? You used to wear that gorgeous red sweater that drove all the boys." "Wild," I laughed. "That was over 40 years ago." "And?" Marge raised an eyebrow. "Has color suddenly become age-restricted while I wasn't looking?" I had no good answer for that. The truth was, somewhere along the way, I had indeed started to believe that bright colors were for the young, that dignity in aging meant fading quietly into the background in beige and navy blue. Looking at my reflection now, I had to admit that the coral color did bring warmth to my face in a way my usual palette never did. "Fine," I conceded. "You win. The outfit stays." "Excellent decision," Marge said with a wink. "Now let's talk about makeup." Half an hour later, we were pulling into the parking lot of the Saguaro Springs Senior Center, a modern, low-slung building with desert landscaping and wide, wheelchair-accessible paths. Even from the car, I could hear music pulsing from within. Not the sedate big band sounds I might have expected, but something more contemporary and upbeat. "What kind of senior center is this?" I asked as we approached the entrance. "The fun kind," Marge replied, pulling open the door. "The kind that understands that just because our hair is gray doesn't mean our lives have to be." Inside, the community room had been transformed for the event. Twinkling lights were strung across the ceiling, tables with autumn-colored linens and small floral centerpieces lined the perimeter, and a space had been cleared in the center for dancing. A DJ, a man who appeared to be in his 60s himself, was set up at one end, managing a sophisticated sound system. The room was already half full with people in a wide range of ages, from 60s to what looked like 90s, all dressed in festive attire. "Marge!" A tall, distinguished-looking man with salt-and-pepper hair approached us, arms outstretched. "We were beginning to think you weren't coming." "And miss the best dance of the year?" "Never." Marge accepted his brief embrace, then turned to me. "Robert, this is my oldest friend, Eleanor. She's visiting from back east. Eleanor, this is Robert Chen, our resident dance instructor, and the man responsible for teaching me to salsa at 63. Robert smiled warmly and extended his hand. "Any friend of Marge's is welcome here. Do. You dance, Eleanor?" "Not if I can help it," I admitted. He laughed. "Then you're in for a treat tonight. We make dancing accessible for everyone. No experience or coordination required." Before I could protest further, Marge was leading me around the room, introducing me to what seemed like dozens of her friends and acquaintances. Everyone was welcoming, many expressing delight that Marge would have company for Thanksgiving, a few even sharing their own stories of holiday family complications. My daughter didn't speak to me for 6 months when I decided to spend Christmas in Spain instead of babysitting her children while she and her husband went to Aspen, confided Iris, an elegantly silver-haired woman who I guessed to be in her early 70s. But we worked through it. Sometimes they need to learn that we're people too, not just parents and grandparents. "My son tried to put me in assisted living last year because I fell and broke my wrist," said Joe, a spry octogenarian, who looked like he could run circles around most 60-year-olds. "I told him I'd go when they pried my car keys from my cold, dead hands. Now we laugh about it, but it took some serious boundary setting." These stories, shared without self-pity, but with clear-eyed honesty, made me feel less alone in my family. Struggles. Maybe what was happening with Michael and Beth wasn't unusual. Maybe it was just part of the natural renegotiation of roles that occurred as children became middle-aged and parents entered their senior years. The music shifted to a line dance that apparently many in the room knew, as people began moving to the dance floor in anticipation. "Oh no," I said, seeing the gleam in Marge's eye. "I told you, no line dancing." "You said you reserved the right to sit it out," Marge corrected. "But I'm not going to let you. This one is super easy. Just follow me. Before I could object further, she had pulled me onto the dance floor, positioning us in a line behind Iris and another woman. Just watch me and do what I do, Marge instructed as the music began, a country tune with a strong, steady beat. 2. My surprise, the steps were indeed simple. 4 steps right, 4 steps left, a quarter turn, and repeat. After stumbling through the sequence once, I began to get the hang of it. By the 3rd repetition, I was moving with more confidence, and by the end of the song, I was actually enjoying myself. See? Not so terrible, is it? Marge asked as we returned to our table, slightly breathless. I wouldn't go that far, I replied, but I was smiling. There was something liberating about moving to the music, about being part of a group all doing the same steps, about focusing on the rhythm and the movement instead of my worries. As the evening progressed, I found myself participating in more dances than I sat out. Robert, true to his word, made everything accessible, demonstrating simplified versions of steps for those who needed them, and creating an atmosphere where mistakes were met with laughter rather than judgment. During a break, as Marge and I sipped punch and caught our breath, Robert approached our table again. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand to me. I looked up in surprise. "Me? Unless there's another Eleanor at this table," he said with a gentle smile. Marge nudged. "Me." "Go on. Robert's an excellent lead. He'll make you look good." Hesitantly, I took his hand and allowed him to guide me to the dance floor just as a slow song began to play, an old standard that Harold and I had danced to at our wedding. A pang of guilt shot through me. Should I be dancing with another man? To our song? Robert must have noticed my hesitation. "Everything okay?" he asked as he positioned us in a traditional dance frame, one hand lightly on my back, the other holding my hand. "Yes," I said, pushing away the guilt. Harold had been gone for 3 years. He would want me to enjoy life, to dance if I felt like dancing. "Just haven't done this in a while. Like riding a bicycle," Robert assured me. "Your body remembers. Just relax and follow my lead." And somehow my body did remember. We moved around the floor with surprising ease, Robert's lead clear but gentle, guiding me through simple turns that felt elegant and natural. For those few minutes, I wasn't a widow, or a mother struggling with rejection, or a woman in her 60s trying to redefine herself. I was just Eleanor, dancing to beautiful music with an accomplished partner. When the song ended, Robert stepped back and gave a small bow. "Thank you for the dance, Eleanor from back east." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a warmth in my cheeks that wasn't entirely from the physical exertion. "That was nice." "Perhaps another before the evening ends," he suggested, escorting me back to where Marge sat with a knowing smile on her face. As Robert walked away, Marge leaned in. "He likes you." "Don't be ridiculous," I said, taking a long sip of my punch. "He's just being polite." "Robert Chen is polite to everyone," Marge agreed, "but he doesn't dance with everyone. In the 2 years I've been coming to these events, I've never seen him ask anyone to slow dance except at the Valentine's Day event when it's expected." I felt the warmth in my cheeks intensify. "It doesn't matter. I'm leaving in a few days." "True," Marge conceded, "though Arizona is a lovely place to visit regularly, and Robert travels sometimes too." "Marge Sullivan," I said firmly, "stop matchmaking. I'm not interested in feeling attractive again? In enjoying male attention? In remembering that you're still alive?" Put that way, it was harder to dismiss. It had felt good to dance with Robert, to be held briefly in a man's arms again, to feel the subtle chemistry of attraction, even if it was mild and fleeting. "I've been Harold's wife for so long," I said quietly. "Even after his death, that's still how I think of myself. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else with a man." Marge's expression softened. "You don't have to know right now," just enjoy. The moment, the dance, the conversation, the feeling. No pressure, no expectations. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of more dancing, laughter, and conversation. Robert did indeed claim me for another dance later, this time to a more upbeat tune that had us moving more vigorously across the floor. I found myself laughing as he twirled me, feeling decades younger and pounds lighter than when I'd arrived. By the time Marge and I returned to her house, it was nearly 11 o'clock, well past my usual bedtime. I was tired but exhilarated, my body pleasantly aching from unaccustomed movement. "Admit it," Marge said as we kicked off our shoes in her entryway. "You had fun." "I did," I conceded. "Though I'm going to feel it tomorrow." "Worth it, though?" I thought about the evening, the dancing, the new acquaintances, the sense of being part of a vibrant community, the unexpected pleasure of dancing with Robert. Worth it, I agreed. Definitely worth it. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and bright. I woke to the scent of coffee brewing and the sound of Marge moving about in the kitchen. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, I felt a pang of loss. This should be me in my own kitchen, starting the turkey, preparing stuffing, setting the table for family. Then I remembered where I was and why, and the pang shifted to something different. Not quite excitement, but a tentative openness to whatever this day might bring. I pulled on a robe over my pajamas and padded to the kitchen, where Marge was scrambling eggs at the stove. "Happy Thanksgiving," she sang out. "Coffee's ready. We're having a light breakfast since we're doing the big meal at 2. I hope you slept well?" "Like a log," I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Though my calves are reminding me that I'm not used to dancing." Marge chuckled. "A small price to pay. Robert asked about you after you headed to the restroom, wanted to know how long you were staying." I felt a flutter of something, embarrassment, pleasure, in my chest. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're here until Monday." She slid fluffy scrambled eggs onto 2 plates and added a slice of toast to each. "He mentioned he's hosting a small poetry reading at his home on Saturday evening. Invited us both." "Poetry?" I raised an eyebrow. "He doesn't strike me as the poetry type." "Robert contains multitudes," Marge said with a grin. "Retired English professor, ballroom dancer, gourmet cook, and the best handyman in the neighborhood. His wife died 5 years ago. Cancer. He's been slowly rejoining the land of the living ever since." Like me, I thought, but didn't say, moving cautiously back toward life after loss. "So, what's the plan for today?" I asked, changing the subject. "You mentioned a big meal at 2? "Yes, we're going to Sophia and Miguel's," Marge explained. "Remember? The couple I introduced you to last night? The ones who retired here from New Mexico? They host a Strays Thanksgiving every year for people who don't have family in the area. Usually about 10 or 12 people, very casual, fantastic food. Miguel makes both a traditional turkey and something he calls a chile verde turkey that will change your life." "That sounds lovely," I said, meaning it. The thought of sharing a meal with new acquaintances, with no complicated family history or expectations, was immensely appealing. "We're in charge of a side dish and dessert," Marge continued. "I was thinking my sweet potato casserole and your famous apple pie?" My apple pie had indeed been famous within my family and circle of friends, a recipe handed down from my grandmother, with a few tweaks I'd added over the years. I hadn't made it since Harold's death. It had been his favorite. "I'd need to go shopping for ingredients," I said, already mentally listing what I'd need. "Already done," Marge replied with a smile. "While you were getting your beauty sleep, I ran to the market. Everything you need is on the counter." I felt a rush of gratitude for my friend's thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Marge. Really." She waved away my thanks. "What are friends for? Besides, I have entirely selfish motives. I've been craving your apple pie for at least 2 decades. After breakfast, we set to work in Marge's kitchen. She assembled her sweet potato casserole, a decadent version with a praline topping that made my teeth ache just looking at it, while I prepared the dough for my pie crust. The familiar rhythm of baking soothed me, the methodical measuring, and mixing a kind of meditation. As I rolled out the crust, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Lily, my oldest grandchild. "Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma. We're at the cabin now. It's pretty here but freezing. Hope Arizona is warmer. Love you lots." Attached was a selfie of Lily bundled up in a heavy coat, her breath visible. In the cold mountain air, a backdrop of pine trees dusted with snow behind her. She was smiling, but it looked forced, the smile of a teenager trying to make the best of a situation she hadn't chosen. I smiled at the image and texted back, "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. Arizona is perfect, sunny and 70s, just about too. Make my apple pie for a party with my friends' neighbors. Having a wonderful time. Love you too." I hesitated, then added, "Tell your siblings I love them too. And your parents." It was as close as I could come to an olive branch without directly contacting Michael or Beth. I wasn't ready for that yet. The hurt was still too fresh. But I didn't want my grandchildren caught in the middle of adult tensions. Moment later, my phone rang. Lily's face appeared on the screen. She was FaceTiming me. "Hello, sweetheart," I answered, propping the phone against a canister on the counter so I could continue working on my pie while we talked. "Grandma?" Lily's face filled the screen, her long dark hair falling around her shoulders. "You changed your hair. It looks so cool." I laughed, touching my pixie cut self-consciously. "Thank you. It was time for a change." "It makes you look younger," she declared. "Doesn't she look great, Thomas?" The phone jostled as Lily apparently grabbed her brother, and Thomas's face appeared next to hers, his expression the carefully neutral look of a 12-year-old boy determined not to show too much enthusiasm about anything. "Hey, Grandma," he said. "Nice haircut." "Thank you, Thomas. How's the mountain cabin?" He shrugged. "It's okay. The internet is really slow, and there's no good place to skateboard." "But the views are amazing," Lily added quickly. "And Jennifer's kids are here. You remember our cousins Zach and Abby? We're going hiking later." "That sounds lovely," I said, genuinely pleased that at least they had cousins their age to play with. "Is Emma there too?" "Mom," Lily shouted, turning away from the phone. "Have you seen Emma?" I winced at the volume, and Marge, who had been tactfully giving me privacy while remaining in the kitchen, chuckled. "She's with Dad and Uncle Jeff, building a snowman," came Beth's voice from somewhere off-screen, sounding strained. Then closer. "Is that your grandmother?" The phone jostled again, and suddenly Beth's face was in the frame, her perfect blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her expression carefully composed. "Eleanor," she said with a politeness that didn't reach her eyes. "Happy Thanksgiving. I hope Arizona is treating you well." "Very well, thank you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The weather is beautiful, and Marge has introduced me to a wonderful community. We're preparing for a Thanksgiving gathering with her neighbors." Something flickered across Beth's face. Surprise? Perhaps that I wasn't alone and miserable? "That sounds nice," she said. "The children wanted to call you." "I'm glad they did," I said sincerely. "It's wonderful to see their faces, even virtually." An awkward pause followed, neither of us quite sure what to say next. "Well," Beth said finally, "I should let them talk to you. We're busy preparing for our meal, too. Jennifer needs help in the kitchen." "Of course," I said. "Happy Thanksgiving, Beth." She nodded stiffly and handed the phone back to Lily, who rolled her eyes the moment her mother was out of frame. "She's been super stressed all day," Lily whispered conspiratorially. "The kitchen here is tiny, and she and Aunt Jennifer keep bumping into each other, and Dad and Uncle Jeff took off with Emma and Zach as soon as they could." I bit back a smile. Family tensions were universal, it seemed, even in the perfect new tradition Beth had envisioned. "Well, holiday cooking can be stressful," I said, diplomatically. "Is Michael around? I'd love to say hello." "He's outside," Lily said. "Want me to go find him?" No, I said quickly. "Don't interrupt his snowman building. Just tell him I called and I said Happy Thanksgiving." "I will," Lily promised. "Oh, Thomas wants to show you something." The phone changed hands again, and Thomas's face appeared, looking slightly more animated than before. "Grandma, check this out," he said, flipping the camera to show a complex structure made entirely of playing cards. "I've been working on it all morning." "That's incredible, Thomas," I said, genuinely impressed. My grandson had always had a knack for detailed, patient work. "How many cards is that?" 104 so far, he said proudly. "I'm going to see if I can use the whole second deck, too." We chatted for a few more minutes about his card structure, Lily's upcoming debate tournament, and their hopes that the cabin might get more snow for sledding. Neither mentioned missing me at Thanksgiving, but their eagerness to share their experiences with me spoke volumes. As we said our goodbyes, with promises to talk again soon, I felt a curious mix of emotions, a lingering sadness at not being with them physically, but also a surprising contentment with where I was and what I was doing. I could love my grandchildren deeply while still embracing this new adventure for myself. "Everything okay?" Marge asked as I set my phone down and returned to my pie making. "Yes," I said and meant it. "The kids are good. They're at the cabin with Beth's sister's family." "And how was it talking to the daughter-in-law?" I considered this as I arranged apple slices in the pie crust. "Strained but civil. She seemed surprised that I wasn't alone." Marge snorted. "Probably expected you to be eating a TV dinner by yourself, feeling sorry about missing her fabulous gathering." "Probably," I agreed. Though from what Lily hinted, the fabulous gathering isn't going quite as smoothly as Beth might have hoped. Crowded kitchen, restless kids, men escaping outdoors at the first opportunity. Sounds like a typical family Thanksgiving to me. "The grass is always greener," Marge said sagely. "Or the turkey is always juicier in this case." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had since Beth's pronouncement in her kitchen. Whether she realized it or not, Beth had inadvertently given me a precious gift, the push I needed to step outside my comfort zone, to rediscover parts of myself that had been dormant for too long. By early afternoon, both Marge's sweet potato, casserole, and my apple pie were done, filling her house with enticing aromas. We changed into what Marge deemed festive but comfortable outfits. For me, a pair of nice slacks and a soft sweater in a rich burgundy that Marge insisted brought out the highlights in my new haircut. "Very autumnal," she approved. "You look lovely." Sophia and Miguel lived just 3 blocks away, so we walked, carrying our dishes carefully. The day was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of desert sage and someone's backyard grill. Their home was similar to Marge's in style, adobe with a red-tiled roof, but larger, with a sprawling patio visible from the street. As we approached, I could hear laughter and music coming from behind the house. "They always set up outside," Marge explained as we walked up the drive. "The weather is usually perfect this time of year, and Miguel likes to use his outdoor kitchen." Sure enough, we rounded the corner to find the patio transformed into an outdoor dining area. A long table covered with a festive tablecloth stood in the center, surrounded by a variety of chairs that suggested they'd been gathered from throughout the house. Strings of small white lights were draped overhead, ready to illuminate the space when darkness fell. Miguel stood at an impressive outdoor cooking station, tending to what looked like 2 different turkeys, while another man operated a smoker off to the side. Sophia spotted us immediately and hurried over, embracing first Marge and then, to my surprise, me. "Welcome, welcome, happy Thanksgiving. Let me take those from you." We handed over our dishes, and Sophia directed us to a table laden with appetizers and drinks. Help yourselves. Everyone is just having snacks and chatting until the turkeys are ready. I looked around at the gathering. About 15 people of various ages, some I recognized from the dance the night before, others unfamiliar. Unlike traditional family Thanksgivings where everyone knew their role and position, this seemed more fluid, with people mingling freely, conversation flowing naturally between apparent strangers and old friends alike. Eleanor. Robert appeared, at my elbow looking distinguished in a light blue button-down shirt and khakis. Marge said you might be joining us. I'm so glad you made it. You're part of this Strays Thanksgiving too? I asked. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling pleasantly. Every year since Maria passed, my children live on the East Coast, New York and Boston. They invite me every year, but traveling during the holidays is a nightmare, so we have our family celebration at Christmas instead. My sons are in the same city as me, I found myself saying. But circumstances this year made other plans better. Robert nodded, not pressing for details. Sometimes a change of scenery is exactly what's needed. Would you like a glass of wine? Miguel makes his own, nothing fancy, but quite good. That would be lovely, I said. As Robert went to fetch our drinks, Marge appeared beside me. See, I told you he likes you. Stop it, I said, but I was smiling. He's just being friendly. Marge hummed skeptically. Friendly enough to volunteer as your personal wine steward. I couldn't help but laugh at her persistence. You're impossible. I prefer optimistic, she countered. Now come meet Sophia's brother and his wife. They're visiting from New Mexico and are considering retiring here too. The next hour passed in a pleasant blur of introductions and conversations. Unlike the awkward small talk I sometimes endured at church functions or neighborhood gatherings back home, these interactions felt easy and genuine. Perhaps it was the shared circumstance of being strays on a family holiday, or perhaps it was the relaxed, inclusive atmosphere Sophia and Miguel had created. Whatever the reason, I found myself enjoying the social interaction in a way I hadn't in years. Robert returned with our wine and remained close by, occasionally joining my conversations, introducing me to others he thought I might connect with, quietly ensuring I felt included without being overbearing. His attentiveness was subtle but unmistakable, and I found myself both flustered by and appreciative of it. When Miguel finally announced that the turkeys were ready, we all gathered around the long table. Chairs were claimed, wine glasses refilled, and Sophia began bringing out the side dishes, including Marge's sweet potato casserole, which earned appreciative murmurs. Before the meal began, Miguel stood at the head of the table, glass raised. Before we eat, I'd like to welcome you all to our home, especially those joining us for the first time. He nodded toward me and a young couple at the far end of the table. Thanksgiving is a day for gratitude, and Sophia and I are grateful. For this community of friends who have become our chosen family, please raise your glasses in a toast to good food, good friends, and the family we create for ourselves. To chosen family, echoed around the table as glasses clinked. As platters began circulating, both a traditional roast turkey and Miguel's famous chili verde turkey, which was indeed life-changing, I felt a lump form in my throat. This was so different from my usual Thanksgiving, with its established traditions and predictable rhythms, yet there was something deeply appealing about it. These people had actively chosen to spend the holiday together, creating their own tradition out of shared circumstances and genuine affection. You okay? Robert asked quietly from beside me, noticing my momentary emotional pause. Yes, I said, blinking back unexpected tears. Just taking it all in. This is my first Thanksgiving away from family in over 40 years. The first one is the hardest, he said with gentle understanding. When Maria first got sick and we couldn't travel or host, it felt wrong somehow, as if we were breaking some cosmic rule of the holiday. But then we realized that the essence of Thanksgiving isn't about the specific people around the table or the particular recipes served. It's about pausing to appreciate what you have, wherever and whoever you are. His words resonated deeply. I had been so focused on what was missing from this Thanksgiving, my family, my home, my traditions, that I'd nearly overlooked what was present. New friendships, new experiences, a new perspective on what my life could be. "That's very wise," I said. "Thank you." He smiled, those kind eyes crinkling again. "Not wisdom, just experience. Now, you must try Miguel's cornbread stuffing with chorizo. It's remarkable." The meal that followed was indeed remarkable. Not just the food, which was excellent, but the atmosphere. Conversation flowed freely up and down the table. Stories were shared, laughter erupted frequently. I found myself telling the group about my Grand Canyon experience the day before, and others chimed in with their own memorable visits to the natural wonder. As the meal wound down and desserts, including my apple pie, which received high praise, were served, Sophia announced an annual tradition, their Thanksgiving Gratitude Circle. "It's very simple," she explained. "We each share one thing we're particularly grateful for this year. It can be profound or mundane, serious or silly, whatever feels most true for you in this moment." People began sharing around the table, gratitude for health after a medical scare, for a new grandchild born across the country, for a successful surgery, for finding this community after relocating. Simple, honest expressions of appreciation for the blessings in their lives. When it came to my turn, I took a deep breath, considering what to say. There were obvious choices: my health, my grandchildren, my comfortable retirement. But what rose to the surface was something else entirely. "I'm grateful for unexpected changes," I said, surprised by my own words. A week ago, I thought I knew exactly how this Thanksgiving would unfold, and I was devastated when those plans fell apart. But now, sitting here with all of you, I realize that sometimes the unexpected turns in life open doors we didn't even know existed. I glanced at Marge, then briefly at Robert. "I'm grateful for new friendships, new experiences, and the reminder that it's never too late to discover new aspects of yourself." A murmur of appreciation rippled around the table, and Marge reached over to squeeze my hand, her eyes suspiciously bright. As twilight descended, the overhead lights came on, creating a magical atmosphere on the patio. Someone brought out a guitar, and impromptu music began, with those who knew the songs joining in. I found myself seated in a comfortable conversation group with Robert, Marge, and two other couples, talking about everything from favorite books to travel dreams to the best local restaurants. When Robert excused himself briefly to help Miguel with something in the kitchen, one of the women, Diane, leaned toward me with a conspiratorial smile. "Robert seems quite taken with you," she said. "I haven't seen him this attentive to anyone new in all the years I've known him." "Oh, I'm sure he's just being kind to a visitor." I demurred, though I felt a flutter of pleasure at her words. "Robert is kind to everyone," her husband Frank agreed. "But Diane's right. This is different. You've sparked something in him." I didn't know how to respond to that, saved from the need to do so by Robert's return. The conversation shifted to other topics, but I found myself acutely aware of his presence beside me, the slight scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body in the cooling evening air, the deep timbre of his laugh when someone said something amusing. It had been so long since I'd experienced this kind of awareness of a man, this faint but unmistakable attraction. Part of me wanted to shut it down immediately. I was leaving in a few days. I wasn't looking for any kind of relationship. I was still, in many ways, emotionally connected to Harold. But another part, the part that had been waking up since I stepped off the plane in Arizona, was curious, even excited by these unfamiliar feelings. As the evening drew to a close, people began to depart, with warm hugs and plans to meet again soon. Marge, Robert, and I were among the last to leave, helping Sophia and Miguel with the initial cleanup despite their protests. "It's been a wonderful Thanksgiving," I told our hosts as we prepared to depart. "Thank you for including me in your key tradition. Any friend of Marge's is welcome at our table," Sophia said, embracing me. "And now you're our friend too. You must come back and visit again." The night air had grown cool as we walked back toward Marge's house, our steps slowed by full stomachs and the pleasant fatigue that follows a day of good food and better company. Robert had insisted on accompanying us, citing the darkness and his mother's long-ago insistence that gentlemen always see ladies safely home. "You two are quiet," Marge observed after we'd walked a block in companionable silence. "Food coma setting in?" "Just contented," I replied. "It was a lovely day." "How does it compare to your usual Thanksgiving?" Robert asked. I considered this. "Different in almost every way, yet somehow fulfilling the same essential purpose: connection, gratitude, breaking bread together." "Will, you tell your family about it?" Marge asked. "Some of it," I said. "I spoke to my grandchildren briefly this morning. They seemed genuinely happy that I was having a good time." "Children are often more adaptable than we give them credit for," Robert observed. "It's adults who cling to the idea that traditions must remain frozen in amber." We reached Marge's house all too soon. She unlocked the door, then turned to Robert, with a too innocent expression. "I just remembered I promised to call my nephew this evening," she said. "He's 3 hours ahead in New York, so I should do that right away. Eleanor, would you mind keeping Robert company on the patio for a few minutes while I make that call?" I shot her a look that said I knew exactly what she was doing, but she merely smiled and disappeared inside, leaving Robert and me standing somewhat awkwardly on her front walkway. "Would you like to sit for a bit?" I offered, gesturing to the comfortable-looking chairs on Marge's small front patio. "The night air is lovely." "I'd like that," Robert said, and we settled into the chairs, the soft glow from Marge's living room windows providing just enough light to see each other. For a moment, we sat in silence, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant call of a coyote, the rustle of a light breeze through Marge's garden, the faint strains of music from another house down the street. "Did you really enjoy today?" Robert asked finally. "Or were you just being polite?" The directness of his question surprised me, but I appreciated it. "I really did enjoy it," I said honestly. "More than I expected to. It wasn't what I'm used to, but maybe that's what made it special." He nodded, as if my answer confirmed something he'd been thinking. Change is hard at our age. We've spent decades establishing routines, traditions, ways of being in the world. Stepping outside of those familiar patterns takes courage. "I don't know if what I did was courageous," I admitted. "It was more reactive. My daughter-in-law uninvited me from the family Thanksgiving, and I didn't want to sit home alone feeling sorry for myself." "Ah," Robert said softly. "That explains the circumstances you mentioned earlier. I hadn't meant to reveal that painful detail, but now that it was out, I found I didn't regret it." "Yes, it was quite a blow, to be honest. After 40 years of being the heart of our family holidays, suddenly I was an inconvenience." "Their loss?" Robert said with quiet conviction. "Though perhaps, in an odd way, your gain." "How so?" He gestured around us, at the beautiful desert night, at Marge's welcoming home, at the two of us sitting together. "Would you be here otherwise? Would you have seen the Grand Canyon, danced at the senior center, experienced a Stray's Thanksgiving? Would we be having this conversation?" "No," I acknowledged. "I wouldn't. And there's value in all of those experiences." "Precisely," he said. "Sometimes the painful moments in life are catalysts for growth, for new beginnings." We fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence now, the kind that exists between people who don't feel the need to fill every moment with words. "I ask you something personal?" I ventured after a while. "Of course. How did you—" After your wife passed, how did you find your way back to living fully? It was a presumptuous question, perhaps even an intrusive one, but it had been on my mind since Marge mentioned his loss. Robert didn't seem offended. He considered my question thoughtfully, his eyes reflecting the soft light from the windows. It was a gradual process, he said finally. For the first year, I was just surviving, going through the motions. Maria had been ill for a long time. Cancer, as Marge may have told you, so in some ways I'd already been grieving while she was still with me. He paused, his gaze distant. The second year was when I really began to rebuild. I started saying yes to invitations I would have declined before. I joined a grief support group at my church. I took up new hobbies, ballroom dancing, poetry readings, things Maria and I had never done together. To avoid the memories, I asked. No, he said, shaking his head. To honor them, actually. Maria was always telling me I should try new things, expand my horizons. I was the cautious one, the homebody. In her final months, she made me promise that I wouldn't use her death as an excuse to retreat from life. A smile touched his lips. She knew me too well. I nodded, understanding completely. Harold had been similar in his final days, concerned about how I would carry on, encouraging me to stay connected to friends, to find new interests. It's been 3 years for me, I said, and I'm just now beginning to feel like I'm emerging from a fog. This trip is the first truly spontaneous thing I've done since Harold died. Then I'm honored to be part of your emergence, Robert said, his voice warm. And I hope it's just the beginning of many new adventures for you. There was something in the way he said it, a gentle invitation, perhaps, or at least an expression, of genuine interest in my journey that made my heart beat a little faster. Thank you, I said softly, for the conversation, for the dancing last night, for seeing me. He reached across the space between our chairs and briefly covered my hand with his, a touch that was respectful yet undeniably charged with something more than mere friendliness. The pleasure has been entirely mine, Eleanor from back east. The front door opened and Marge appeared, her timing suspicious enough that I wondered if she'd been watching through the window. Sorry about that, she said, not sounding sorry at all. My nephew is having a crisis with his in-laws. Needed a sympathetic ear. Family drama is universal, Robert observed, standing. I should be heading home. Thank you both for a wonderful Thanksgiving. Will we see you at your poetry reading? On Saturday? Marge asked. I hope so, he said, his eyes meeting mine briefly. 7 o'clock. Very casual. Just a few friends sharing words that move us. We'll be there, Marge answered before I could respond. After Robert had gone, disappearing. Into the darkness with a final wave, Marge turned to me with a triumphant expression. Don't you dare say I told you so, I warned, leading the way inside. I wasn't going to, she protested, following me. I was going to say, he's definitely interested, which is a completely different statement. I sighed, but I was smiling. You're incorrigible, and you're glowing, Marge countered. When's the last time a handsome, intelligent man looked at you the way Robert was looking at you tonight? I wanted to dismiss her observation, but I couldn't. There had been something in Robert's gaze, in his attention, in the brief touch of his hand on mine, that had awakened feelings I'd thought were permanently dormant. It doesn't matter, I said, heading for the kitchen to make a cup of tea. I'm leaving on Monday. Planes fly both ways, Marge pointed out, leaning against the kitchen counter. And telephones work across state lines. I'm not suggesting you pack a wedding dress, Eleanor. I'm just saying that connection, real connection, is rare at any age. When you find it, it's worth exploring. I busied myself with the tea kettle, not meeting her eyes. It was one pleasant conversation on a patio. Let's not make it into more than it was. But even as I said the words, I knew I was trying to convince myself as much as Marge. There had been a spark there, an unmistakable current of mutual attraction. And while it scared me, the thought of opening myself to potential hurt, of navigating the complex emotions of moving beyond widowhood, it excited me too. "Just promise me one thing," Marge said, her tone softening. "Don't dismiss the possibility, out of fear or some misplaced sense of loyalty to Harold. You deserve happiness, Eleanor, in whatever form it takes." I looked up at my oldest friend, suddenly grateful beyond words for her presence in my life, for her push to get me out of my comfort zone, for her unwavering belief in the possibility of joy at any age. "I promise," I said. "I'll keep an open mind and an open heart." And as I sipped my tea later that night, looking out at the star-filled desert sky from Marge's guest room window, I realized something profound. This Thanksgiving, so different from what I'd planned or expected, had given me something far more valuable than any traditional family gathering could have. It had given me back myself. The self that could feel attraction and excitement, that could embrace new experiences, that could imagine a future filled with possibilities rather than just memories. The day after Thanksgiving dawned with a clarity that seemed fitting for my state of mind. I woke early, my body still on Midwestern time, and slipped out of bed without disturbing Marge. Wrapping myself in the soft robe she'd provided, I padded to the kitchen to make tea, then took my steaming mug out to the patio to watch the sunrise. The desert awakening was unlike anything I'd experienced back home. The gradual illumination of the mountains in the distance, the way the light caught the spines of the saguaro cacti, turning them golden, the chorus of unfamiliar bird calls greeting the day. I sat in peaceful contemplation, reflecting on how much had changed in just a few days. A week ago, I had been devastated by Beth's exclusion, feeling cast aside and irrelevant. Now, while that hurt hadn't disappeared entirely, it had been tempered by new experiences, new connections, new possibilities. I had danced. I had seen the Grand Canyon. I had laughed with strangers who were becoming friends. I had felt the first stirrings of attraction for a man who wasn't my Harold. "There you are." Marge's voice broke into my reverie as she joined me on the patio, her own mug of coffee in hand. "You're up with the birds." "It's so beautiful," I said, gesturing to the landscape before us. I didn't want to miss it. "One of the perks of desert living," she agreed, settling into the chair beside me. "So, what's on the agenda for today? Black Friday shopping?" I laughed at the idea. Absolutely not. I've never understood the appeal of fighting crowds for discounted merchandise. "Me neither," Marge admitted. "I was testing you. If you'd said yes, I'd have known body snatchers had replaced my friend in the night." No body snatchers, just the regular old me, with a new haircut and a slightly expanded comfort zone. Marge smiled over the rim of her mug. "Speaking of expanded comfort zones, what did you think of Robert?" I should have expected the question, but it still made me flush like a schoolgirl. "He seems very nice," I said noncommittally. "Very nice?" Marge repeated incredulously. "Eleanor Barnes, you were practically sparkling when you talked with him last night. Very nice doesn't make a woman sparkle." I sighed, knowing she wouldn't let this go. "Fine. He's charming, intelligent, thoughtful, and yes, attractive. And there might have been a moment on your patio after you so subtly abandoned us." "I knew it." Marge clapped her hands in delight. "What kind of moment? Details, please." "Nothing scandalous," I assured her, though my cheeks warmed at the memory. "Just a connection, a recognition of possibility." Marge's expression softened. "Those are the best kinds of moments. So, you'll come to his poetry reading tomorrow?" I said I would, didn't I? "You didn't say anything." "I accepted for you. I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "Yes, I'll come to the poetry reading. Though I should warn you, I know nothing about poetry beyond what I taught to ninth graders for 30 years. It's not a test, Marge assured me. Just people sharing words that move them. Some read their own work, others share beloved poems by published authors. It's about connection through language. We spent the morning exploring Papago Park, marveling at the red sandstone buttes that rose dramatically from the desert floor. We hiked a gentle trail to a formation called Hole in the Rock, a natural opening in a massive sandstone hill that framed a spectacular view of the city beyond. As we headed toward the exit of the botanical garden in the afternoon, my phone rang, Michael's ringtone. I froze, staring at the screen in surprise. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Marge prompted. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. "Hello, Michael." "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded strained, uncertain. "Is this a good time to talk?" "Of course," I said, motioning to Marge that I needed a moment. She nodded understandingly and moved a tactful distance away. "How was your Thanksgiving?" "It was okay," he said, his tone suggesting it had been less than okay. The cabin was smaller than Beth expected, and the kitchen was pretty basic. Emma got a cold, Thomas was bored without his usual games, and Lily and her cousin had some kind of teenage drama that resulted in a lot of door slamming. I bit back, the urge to say, "I told you so," or offer the sympathy that would normally have been my automatic response. Instead, I simply said, "I'm sorry to hear that. Family holidays can be stressful in new environments." "Yeah," he agreed, sounding relieved at my neutral response. "How about you? How was Arizona?" "Wonderful, actually," I said, allowing genuine enthusiasm to color my voice. "I saw the Grand Canyon yesterday. It was breathtaking, Michael. Truly life-changing. And then Marge and I had Thanksgiving with her neighbors. About 15 people, all ages, delicious food, fascinating conversations. It was different from our usual tradition, but special in its own way." "Wow," he said, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. "That sounds great, Mom. I'm glad you didn't. I was worried you might be sitting alone eating a frozen dinner and feeling sorry for myself." I finished for him. "Something like that," he admitted. "Lily showed us the pictures you sent. Your hair looks great, by the way. Very modern." "Thank you," I said, touching my pixie cut self-consciously. It was time for a change. An awkward silence fell between us. "Mom," Michael finally said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have let Beth uninvite you from Thanksgiving. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right." The words I'd been waiting to hear, yet they brought a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also a surprising detachment. The hurt was still there, but it no longer dominated my emotional landscape. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "It did hurt, Michael. A lot." "I know," he said, sounding genuinely remorseful. "I should have stood up to Beth. It's just, you know how she gets when she has her mind set on something. And she had this vision of the perfect mountain Thanksgiving with her sister's family." "I understand," I said, though part of me wanted to point out that standing up to his wife when she was being unreasonable was actually part of his job as both a husband and a son. But that conversation could wait for another time. "What matters is that you recognize it wasn't handled well." "It wasn't," he agreed. "And I want to make it up to you. Maybe we could do a special Christmas Eve dinner at our house? Just family?" I hesitated, wondering if just family included me this time. "That sounds nice," I said cautiously. "But let's talk about specifics when I get back. I'm still processing a lot right now." That evening, as Marge and I sat on her patio watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of pink and gold, I shared my conversation with Michael. "He actually apologized," I explained. "Admitted that letting Beth uninvite me was wrong." "Well, hallelujah," Marge said dryly. The boy finally grew a backbone. "Marge," I chided, though I couldn't help but smile at her bluntness. "He's trying. That counts for something." "It does," she acknowledged. "Though if I were you, I'd make him sweat a little before fully forgiving him. A little healthy boundary setting could do wonders for your relationship going forward." I considered her advice as darkness fell. She wasn't wrong. For too long, I'd prioritized harmony over honesty in my family relationships, swallowing hurts and disappointments to keep the peace. Perhaps it was time for a new approach there too, one that honored my own needs and feelings as much as everyone else's. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about what happens when I go back home." "What about it?" Marge asked. "I don't want to lose this feeling, this sense of possibility, of adventure. I'm afraid I'll slip right back into my old routines, my old ways of thinking." Marge considered this. "What if you made a concrete plan to prevent that? A specific commitment to yourself?" "Like what?" "Like..." She thought for a moment. "Like scheduling a regular adventure. Once a month, maybe. Something new, something that pushes your comfort zone a bit. And it doesn't have to be big. It could be trying a new restaurant by yourself, or taking a class in something you've always been curious about, or even just driving to a neighboring town you've never explored." The idea appealed to me. "I like that. A monthly adventure." "And," Marge added with a twinkle in her eye, "you could schedule regular visits back here. Arizona is lovely in the winter when your Midwestern town is buried in snow." I laughed. "Are you suggesting I become a snowbird? Would that be so terrible? 2 weeks here, maybe once every couple of months? I have the guest room. The community would welcome you. And certain poetry-reading English professors might be persuaded to show you around." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks at the mention of Robert. "You're incorrigible." "I prefer helpfully suggestive," Marge countered. "But seriously, Eleanor, think about it. Your life doesn't have to shrink as you age. It can expand. It should expand." Saturday evening arrived, and with it, the poetry reading at Robert's home. I had spent the day with Marge at a local art fair, where I'd commissioned special wooden boxes for my grandchildren as Christmas gifts, a tangible reason to return to Arizona in January. Robert's Spanish-style bungalow was warm and inviting, with bookshelves lining the walls and comfortable furniture arranged to encourage conversation. About a dozen people were gathered in the living room, some familiar faces from Thanksgiving dinner, others new to me but equally welcoming. "I am so glad you could come," Robert said as he welcomed us at the door, his smile warming me from within. "May I get you a glass of wine?" Throughout the evening, people took turns sharing poems, some classic, some contemporary, some original works. When it came to Robert's turn, he read a powerful piece about beginning again, about finding the courage to step into the unknown after loss. His eyes found mine several times during the reading, and I knew the selection was no coincidence. When my turn came, I hadn't prepared a poem, but I shared a few lines from a letter Harold had written me on our 40th anniversary. His words about our life together having the beauty of a garden growing through all seasons. There were misty eyes around the room when I finished, and Robert's gaze held mine with a depth of understanding that needed no words. After the formal readings concluded and people broke into smaller conversations, Robert invited me to see his back garden. Under a vast canopy of stars, he showed me his telescope, helping me focus on a perfect crescent moon that seemed close enough to touch. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice gentle but resolute, "I know we've only known each other for a few days, and I understand that your life is established elsewhere. But I feel a connection with you that I haven't felt in a very long time. I'd like to explore it, if you're willing, slowly, respectfully, with no pressure or expectations." The straightforward honesty of his words touched me deeply. There was no game playing here, no coyness, Just the direct communication of two adults who had lived long enough to know the value of authenticity. I feel it too, I admitted, turning to face him. And yes, I'd like to explore it as well. I'm not sure what form that might take with the distance between us, but I'm open to finding out. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. That's all I can ask for. Openness to possibility. I seem to be developing a taste for that lately, I said with a small laugh. Openness to possibility has led me to some unexpected places this week. My final day in Arizona passed in a pleasant blur of small adventures. A farewell brunch with several of Marge's friends, including Robert, a visit to a local museum, a sunset walk in a nearby park. Robert and I maintained a comfortable balance of warmth and respect, neither rushing nor denying the connection growing between us. We made tentative plans for my January visit, and he promised to email within the week. Monday morning arrived all too soon, with Marge driving me to the airport in her little red convertible, the top down despite the early hour because, as she insisted, you need one last dose of Arizona sunshine before returning to the frozen tundra. As we said our goodbyes at the departure drop-off, Marge embraced me tightly. This isn't an ending, she reminded me. It's just a pause in the adventure. You'll be back in January, and I expect regular updates until then. I promise, I assured her. And thank you for everything, for pushing me when I needed pushing, for introducing me to your world, for helping me remember who I am beyond my familiar roles. That's what true friends do, Marge said, blinking rapidly. Now go before I get emotional. Nothing worse than a weepy old broad making a scene at the airport. I laughed, gave her one final hug, and headed into the terminal, my heart full, but not heavy. The flight home gave me time to reflect and prepare for re-entry into my regular life. I would need to face Michael and Beth, to establish new boundaries, while maintaining family harmony, to integrate my Arizona revelations into my Midwestern reality. But I felt equipped for these challenges in a way I hadn't just 1 week ago. When I finally reached my condo late that afternoon, it felt both familiar and strangely different, as if the space had remained the same while its occupant had transformed. I unpacked methodically, placing my turquoise bracelet prominently on my dresser as a tangible reminder of my journey. Then I sat down at my small desk and made 3 lists. Monthly adventures, cooking classes, weekend trips to nearby cities, art gallery openings. January Arizona visit, returning to pick up the grandchildren's gifts, attending the Winter Arts Festival, reconnecting with new friends. New boundaries, saying no without guilt. Prioritizing my own interests alongside family obligations, speaking up when hurt rather than swallowing it. As I reviewed the lists, my phone chimed with an incoming text from Lily. Welcome home, Grandma. Can't wait to hear all about your trip. Can I come over tomorrow after school? I smiled and replied, Absolutely. I have stories and pictures to share. Love you. A moment later, another text arrived, this one from Michael. Mom, glad you're back safe. Would like to talk when you're settled. Dinner this week? I considered his invitation. The old Eleanor would have immediately agreed, eager to smooth over any awkwardness, to re-establish the comfortable status quo. But the Eleanor who had stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon, who had danced with a handsome retired professor, who had read her late husband's words to a room full of strangers, that Eleanor had different priorities now. Let's aim for Friday. Evening, I replied. I need a few days to catch up on things here. Setting a boundary, small but significant. It felt right. As evening fell, I made myself a simple dinner and carried it to my small balcony, where I could watch the sunset. It wasn't the dramatic desert spectacle I'd enjoyed from Marge's patio, but it had its own quiet beauty, familiar but seen through new eyes. My phone chimed again. An email notification. From Robert. Dear Eleanor, you've only been gone a few hours, but I already feel your absence. The poetry gathering seems quieter without your thoughtful presence, the desert sky less vibrant without your appreciation of it. I've been thinking about the poem I shared, about beginning again, about the courage it takes to step into the unknown. You exemplify that courage, taking what could have been a hurtful exclusion and transforming it into an opportunity for growth and discovery. I look forward to our continued correspondence and to your return in January. Until then, know that you've left an indelible impression on this desert dweller's heart. With warm regards, Robert. I smiled, feeling a gentle glow of possibility warm me from within. Who would have thought that Beth's uninvitation would lead to this, to new friendships, to potential romance, to a rediscovery of my own capacity for joy and adventure? As darkness fell fully, I gazed up at the emerging stars, less visible here than in the desert, but present nonetheless. The same stars Robert might be viewing through his telescope at this very moment. The thought created a connection across the miles that separated us, a reminder that some things transcend distance and time. I had come full circle but was not the same woman who had received Beth's painful news just over a week ago. That Eleanor had felt diminished by the exclusion, defined by her loss. This Eleanor felt expanded by new experiences, defined by her own choices and possibilities. My son's wife had told me I couldn't attend the family gathering, and in making that surprising decision to go to Arizona instead, I had found something infinitely more valuable than a seat at a holiday table. I had found myself, and that was a gift worth all the hurt that had preceded it. As I raised my glass in a silent toast to the night sky, to Marge, to Robert, to my own emerging courage, I felt a sense of peace and anticipation intertwined. This was not an ending, but a beginning, the first chapter of the next phase of my life, a phase rich with possibility, connection, and the joy of continued discovery. And that was something truly worth giving thanks for.